Chapter 13. Lillian felt uncomfortable. Not just right now, with the two very arrogant, very handsy wolf shifters that Lex had insisted they entertained because she liked how the big one looked like he'd let her on his face while she...
No.
Lillian felt uncomfortable, but it was not because of that. It wasn't even the looks Lex had been giving her now that she suspected something was up or the awkward, quiet moments they had been having.
Nope.
The reason that Lillian was feeling uncomfortable was from something she'd never expect to happen. Karen had complimented her, and it freaked her out. Not that she had the right to say anything about it, but she had honestly thought he'd be foaming at the mouth, thinking of ways he'd tie her to the back of his car and drag her through the streets until she was roadkill. The car he was currently retrieving from some shady mechanic after they had to walk for 3 days to the nearest town, avoiding the main road, because Karen had no plans of trusting anybody until they got into town, and when they did finally reach town, he had to go to some shady doctor in some shady building in a shady part of town for some shady surgery. So when he was wrapping up the same blah-blah speech he usually gave them any time that he left, he pulled her aside and told her good job under fire. Out loud. Like it was nothing. And now she couldn't help but to believe that the sky was going to fall at any time now. No, FO real, I'm 100% single. I'm telling you, girl, I don't even play like that. The big guy whose name Lillian failed to remember smirked, exposing his canines. Even in human form, wolf shifters had impressive knife-sharp canines. She rolled the thought around in her head. She was doing anything but rolling her eyes at Lex, who was being as ladylike as Karen. She had been basically trying to climb on top of that wolf. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for Lillian, Lex would have most likely done something stupid already. Oh, yeah, you just kiss your sister on the mouth for pictures? No, yeah, totally. Lillian rolled her eyes. Lex shot her a look, and Lillian shrugged. A funny misunderstanding that I explained already. He looked down at Lex, who was clinging onto him like he might vanish. Your friend needs to lighten up. Yeah, Lillian, lighten up. We all know you know how to. Really? You want to talk about this now? Lex threw her hands up dramatically, backing off the guy. What is there to talk about? You said it was a flashlight and a stun gun, right? Yeah. Then, there's nothing to talk about, unless you're lying? Hey, you want to see the jacuzzi that I just got installed? The one she had been ignoring this entire time asked from beside her. She continued to ignore him. Lex, I'm not lying to you, but even if I were, why do you want to know? Will it change how you feel about me? Lex's shoulders relaxed a bit, and Lillian felt like punching herself for playing on her empathy.
No.
Lex responded. Okay. Would it change the fact that I still need your and Karen's help, or that without you two, I would be dead in a matter of days? No, you are pretty useless. Lex giggled. Lillian walked over to her, giggling back, and punched her in the arm. Then quit bitching, bitch damn. They both started laughing, completely forgetting about the two wolf shifters they had been talking to. So, are we doing this or not? The big one asked. They just looked at him, laughed, and started their walk back up. Karen flexed his fingers, checking them for the 4th time since standing in this inferno of an office he had been waiting in for the last hour, filling out paperwork and counting down every mistake he made during the battle in the forest. It had taken until they were only an hour away from making it to town before he made the rookie mistake of relaxing a bit, and the adrenaline from it all to finally vanish, and he felt everything. The 2 holes in his body from where the bullets had struck him. The sleep deprivation from staying up for 3 days straight. The cravings he was beginning to experience from the Phoenix ash. The Kyrian that had been burning his insides like acid, or the extraneous strain he had been putting on himself to keep watch on the girls. He had had to lean on Lex, or maybe Lamb. He wasn't really sure. He had lost a lot of blood, and he nearly passed out before they made it to the Happy Doctor. Doc was an old necromancer who worked for Dreyfin. Karen and the Doc had become unlikely friends during Karen's time with Dreyfin. The Doc was a hard ass and never let Karen leave his care without a lecture, not even this time, and back then Karen was a hothead who would get into fights with the other Hell's Mob members. So he was always getting lectures from the old bastard, and yet Karen had found himself becoming fond of the old man. Even so, he never liked how he felt after one of the Doc sessions. They always got the job done, but he could swear he could feel the bugs and other things every time the doc made him eat them, still alive, swimming around in his body. This time, it felt as if a group of ants were crawling around his shoulder, and he was doing his best to ignore the sensation when the orc who ran this poor excuse of a business walked into the room, head down in a clipboard. 883? Your car is now ready. Just need you to initial here. It says you've already paid, so after you sign, you'll be good to go. Karen snatched the papers the man was handing out, signed them, and let them fall to the ground behind him as he took the keys and walked away. He still had his checkup with the doc before he could get going with the girls. He checked his pockets for his phone. He'd text Lex that he'd be back soon, but remembered that he had lost it during the battle in the forest. He exited the office into the entrance, where his car was now parked, and mumbled a curse. He opened the door, sat down, and then slammed it shut. He took a deep breath in, out. What was going on with him? Twice had he not seen it coming. He was Karen Lucianditas, and no matter how that made him feel sometimes, he had a reputation to maintain. He had acted like a rookie. He almost let his assignment get caught. He had allowed himself to get injected with Kyrian, all of that, and yet the most surprising thing of all was that Lamb had actually been able to get his hysterical sister out of harm's way. He knew how his sister was when she was like that, determined, more like stubborn really, and sometimes even violent, so he knew it couldn't have been easy for her to have gotten his sister out of there. Honestly, even in the moment, he was afraid that it wouldn't work, but she had pulled it off. Now he owed her, and he had decided that he could be nicer to her, even if he still didn't trust her completely. Her getting his sister out of danger did show, at the very least, that she cared for his sister, and that was enough for now. He stretched, started up the engine, and just sat there listening to it purr before he took off down the road. He had forgotten that the orcs that inhabited the towns around this side of the forest were so fat, and he wasn't only talking about the men. They also smelled awful, so awful that he couldn't drive around with his windows down. He wanted to see the dock and then get out as fast as possible. Karen hated how the orcs' civilization looked. Their houses were made of giant slain creatures that they hunted and wood, and there was clearly no regulation on how the house was supposed to look because houses here came in all shapes and sizes, and like the freaks orcs are, they all only have one floor. No matter the length of the house or business, there's not even a rule against having more than one floor, they just do it. Parks had kids fighting each other with metal pipes, with their parents watching like it was normal, and there wasn't a market around for miles. If you wanted homemade, you'd have to go kill it. There also wasn't a strip club, not that he minded, but he needed to see some titties now. The orcs also believed in natural roads because, of course, they did, and it all just felt like too much. He finally came to a stop in an abandoned alley and walked for a few minutes before finding himself in front of one of the goofy-looking buildings. It was shaped like a tiger's face and was no larger than a shed. This was one of the spots where Drafin stashed off his doctors and anyone he needed tortured or he had disappeared. Nobody was outside, nope, that would draw attention. The bodyguards were inside, but the camera staring him down was state-of-the-art, and Drafin always kept at least one of his lieutenants on sites like these, and for most people going up against even one would be considered suicide, so people didn't fuck with it no matter how big of a group, and the police stayed away too terrified to incur Drafin's wrath. That was real power, and Karen wanted it. He stood in front of the door and stared into the camera. A click, and the door opened slightly. Karen pushed past it and headed downstairs, where he was flanked by two lackeys. "Do you have any weapons on you, sir?" One said, avoiding eye contact. The other followed suit, and Karen smiled to himself. They knew their place good. "Just my Berettas." He yawned. You can't bring that inside." "Are you telling me what I can't do?" Karen growled. "No, sir, but..." "So, what is the problem then? Get out of my way before I stop being so patient." "Yes, sir," they said, clearing the way for him. He strode past them, going deeper into what looked like it came straight out of a comic book. Bright lights in a corridor with Cochlean steel doors spread 8 feet apart on each side. There were multiple corridors that all looked similar and all intersected each other throughout the facility, and if you weren't careful, you could easily get lost. Karen knew that from experience. He'd gotten lost down here lots of times when he first started coming here. He could now navigate the entirety of the sectors he was allowed to roam, and some of them that he wasn't allowed to roam, in a blindfold, however. He walked down the corridors, passing 2 guards down one, and a doctor who didn't look at Karen, but he got the feeling that the guy was watching him down another. He took a few more turns and opened the door closest to the turn on the right. "Where are you, Doc? Let's get this stupid checkup over with, so I can get going." The doc appeared from his back room, looking older than Karen had ever seen him. All necromancers that practiced the arts slowly lost the coloring in their skin. It was the price for their magic, so an old-timer like the doc who had been practicing the art for over 7 dozen years always looked sickly, but something was off. "Karen, I was just about to call. You have a visitor." The mood dropped, and Karen's mouth went dry. His body only reacted like this in his presence. "You're not where I left you, and when I heard you showed up here looking like hell, I just had to know." Karen stared into the eyes of the monster himself, and it was like looking in that mirror all over again. The bloody red eyes with slits, the scales that hung to skin on one side of his body like some kind of messed up armor, but he couldn't vomit this time, not in front of Drayfin. The last time he had, Drayfin had beat him within an inch of his life and had promised there would not be a next time. "Where are you headed, and who is this girl I've been hearing about?" Chapter 14. "He needs me. I just know he does, and I have to go see him right now," Lex shouted. Her head was pounding, and that gut-churning feeling that something was wrong with Karen was an all-consuming force inside her, and it was making breathing difficult. Her heart was hurting, and she knew it wouldn't stop until she laid eyes on her brother and proved to herself beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was okay. "Listen, Lex, I'm sure he's fine. Just calm down. He isn't even late yet. He still has like half an hour or so." A sudden rush of anger had Lex spun around and pinning Lillian up against a nearby wall with a thud.
I'm not
asking. Lillian met her eyes, her own intensity raging like dragon fire, and Lex steeled herself for whatever she would say. Whatever it was wouldn't matter. Lillian couldn't possibly understand what she was feeling right now. How could she? But in a moment so fast, Lex had possibly made it up. Lillian gave her a look that she couldn't decipher and looked away. "Whatever, do what you want. Thanks for giving me permission, Mom. I will." She let go of Lillian and stormed out the door, nearly tearing it off of its hinges on her way out. She heard Lillian fall in line behind her, but she didn't turn around to check. She didn't shout back at her or say thanks for coming. She just kept moving, and she wasn't stopping until she got to the doc's place where Karen should be getting his checkup. She had to see him to prove the group of dying butterflies in her stomach wrong.
What?
"Lizard, got your tongue?" Drayfin open-mouthed smiled, exposing the 3 rows of razor-sharp teeth and his ridiculously long tongue. Karen hardened himself, squashing any emotion. Drayfin only respected strength, and he didn't kill those whom he respected. "What are you doing here, Drayfin?" Drayfin's eyes narrowed, and Karen had to will away the part of him that was screaming for him to become as small as possible. He hated that feeling, disgusted by it, was more like it. He felt like one of his targets, and it made him want to vomit. He was the hunter, not the hunted. "I told you why, I heard." Karen growled. "I don't care what you heard. I don't work for you anymore, so you don't get to just show up where I am." Drayfin laughed, and Karen swallowed down the solidified gravel in his throat, preparing himself for the
Crack.
split.
Bang. Boom.
Karen laid upright, staring at the almost blinding white ceiling. Broken wood and falling paper littered the area from the blow Drayfin delivered to Karen's face. He could still feel the hit dancing in the blood dripping from his split cheek or the throbbing in his head. He spat blood. "Great, now Doc's gotta fix me all over again." Karen joked. A flicker of rage flashed in Drayfin's eyes, and Karen couldn't move before he had a hand in his face. "Smartass." Drayfin scoffed. "If you weren't so damn good at your job, I'd do more than just knock you on your ass." Drayfin dropped his hand and walked back a few paces. "Are you going to make me ask again? Or do you have any more questions for me?" Karen bared his teeth, and his head exploded with pain. but he willed himself not to budge an inch. He had no love for the annoying little girl, but she did help him by taking Lex off of his hands back in the forest, and he owed her for that, and it was time for him and Drayfin to have this conversation anyways. He was not Drayfin's to command anymore. Drayfin smiled again. Fine, don't answer. I'll find out eventually, but since you're not in a sharing mood, neither am I.
You can go now.
You are no longer allowed to use any of my people. Rather, you're dying and need a medic or shooting and run out of bullets. My people have been informed not to help you until otherwise ordered. Drayfin's smile disappeared. You will bend a knee to me, fire breather. Karen held his gaze until that self-assured smile returned. It's only a matter of time. Drayfin turned and walked over to the doctor. Call in somebody to clean this up. And Karen, say hello to Lexi for me. Karen's blood roared in his ears, and he felt hot, burning hot, as if he had dived into an inferno, but he couldn't lash out when Drayfin's dismissal was clear. He bit his lip, stood up on aching legs, and limped over to the door. He wasn't furious. Fury was him, and he needed an outlet. Karen. The bastard was enjoying this. Karen could just tell. Karen stopped moving but continued to stare at the door. I do hope you reconsider someday. Karen waited for less than a moment longer before whipping the door open and then slamming it shut behind him. His head was screaming at him now. His entire body was stiff and in pain. He stomped away from the room, steam pouring from off his skin. Oh shit, he couldn't breathe. He needed to breathe, but he was freaking out and he couldn't get control of himself. He was struggling to make it over to the guards standing at the stairs who were now watching him, but their attentions were pulled away by someone coming down the stairs. A wave of nausea knocked him to his knees just in front of the entrance to the stairs, and he couldn't even breathe it away. What a fucking nightmare. He was showing weakness to all of these potential enemies. Why did he let Drayfin get to him like this? He had to get control of himself before these morons did something stupid, like thinking they even stood a chance against him. If it came down to it, and Drayfin ever decided to have him killed, Karen wouldn't stand a chance. Rather, Drayfin took care of Karen himself, or he sent the full force of Hell's Mob. It didn't matter. Drayfin was too powerful, and even though Karen could wipe out most of Hell's Mob, there are a few in their ranks that would be almost impossible to beat outnumbered. Karen? An anchor in the chaos of his mind. Lex. Karen buried his head into his sister's lap and groaned as she started running her hands through his hair. The three of them had returned to their hotel half an hour ago, and Lillian had made herself scarce immediately, giving Karen a look he didn't understand before shutting herself up in her room, leaving the two of them to talk in the living room. They must have taken showers before coming to find him because the room stank of that stupid strawberry shampoo the two of them liked, and Lillian's hair was still wet. No surprise there. He pinched Lex's outer thigh, and she yelped. Don't do that. She punched him on the back of his head. I'm sorry, man hands. It won't happen again. She hit him again. Okay, I'm done. Seriously, stop hitting me, please, I'm begging. Why are you so immature? I wish you were more like Lily. She, unlike you, is very mature, and she has never almost started war with a militia over a game of Uno. Karen lifted and twisted his head until he faced his sister. He cheated, and you know it. She gave him that withering look of hers, the same one she always gave him when he said something dumb. No, Karen, he didn't. You just suck at Uno. Karen tried to hold a serious face and got to all of the count of 2 before he smiled slyly. Oh, so you know. She rolled her eyes. Of course I know I'm not dumb, but that ugly bastard Leon should have thrown the game. I'm Karen Lucian fucking Didas, he needs to keep me happy, not the other way around. Well, Karen Lucian fucking Didas. Thanks to your massive ego, I had to carry a knife around in grade school. Oh, I'm sorry, you're blaming that on me. The way I remember it is that you got caught preparing to help your big brother fight bad guys. He laughed. You're remembering wrong. Lex said, smacking her lips. I'm sure I am. Karen said as the joy of the moment slowly dissipated. Drayfin was at the docks. Lex immediately swallowed him up in a tight embrace. It's okay. You're here with me now. You can tell me more about it, or you can just lie here and sleep if you want. It's up to you. He yawned. I think that I'll just sleep. She smiled. Go ahead. I'll be right here when you wake up. He rested his head back in her lap and closed his eyes. Love you, Lex. Sleep tight, Karen. And in only a few minutes, he was thankfully entering a dreamless sleep. Lillian leaned over the balcony in her room and looked into the busy streets of the town below. For all of the times, Talion had talked about all of the races and how the current peace we all were experiencing is only an illusion, held together by him and his company for his brother Demetrius Atrium, the king of all of Solaris, also known as the Great Conqueror. Revolutionists, journalists dumb enough to try and tell the truth about his regime. Troublesome politicians, moms, dads, children. Anybody who dare challenge the authority of a dictator. Talion sent men to handle it. Professional hitmen. And that dilemma was what had Lillian out in the cool air tonight, people watching to pass the time. She wasn't worried about Karen. He had more than proven he was able to handle himself under fire. But Lex, it's not that she wasn't able to fend for herself. But Lillian didn't want to be the reason Lex had to watch her brother run into the line of fire without her, and it was clear Karen was dead set on doing all of the fighting by himself, and that was obviously killing Lex. So now Lillian had been thinking Karen was right. And Lex shouldn't have come. Not to mention all of the danger they were in at all times of the day. She smiled and waved at two orc children who had noticed her and were waving back and grinning. Mrs. Why do you look like that? Do you never eat? She stopped waving, surprised by the audacity of these two punks. They didn't even know her. They were laughing, but before she could gather her thoughts, they took off running. Hey, you punks, get back here.
Top?
She leaned further over the edge and shouted. How are you going to talk about how somebody else looks when you look like an overgrown toad? They didn't turn back, and she huffed a breath. She thought kids were supposed to be pure and good, like the ones on TV, but instead, they were little assholes who would insult a woman's figure uncoaxed. She sighed, relaxed, and returned fully back onto the balcony. Move an inch, and I'll put a Kyrian bullet through your skull. A female said quietly but sternly. Lillian's body locked up. How had she not noticed? She didn't hear either of the doors open, so she must have come from the roof. But how did she know where to find her in the first place?
Fuck. Fuck. Fuck.
She was so fucked. Unless she used that power and blind the woman, and get to Karen and Lex. I just want to ask you a few questions. The woman spoke again. It was now or never. She started to dig inside herself to drag up that power when something that smelled kind of sweet and, oh shit, it was chloroform. The bitch was trying to knock her out, and Lillian was having a tough time stopping her. She was unnaturally strong, and the sudden interruption had broken the concentration required to use that power. K. The woman slammed her elbow into Lillian's face, using her other arm to stop Lillian from falling, and while Lillian was disoriented, the woman pounced, holding down the cloth over her face, sending her into the black of oblivion. Chapter 15. Lillian's head was foggy, and she felt strange, like something was attached to her skin.
Ouch.
Whatever it was tight, and it hurt, and for some reason she felt afraid. What time was it? Had she fallen asleep? She hadn't thought she was that tired, but maybe. What is that smell? And why does my head hurt? And the cement blocks on her eyelids finally shifted, and she lifted them slowly to reveal a room covered in. Was that plastic sheeting? Oh fuck. Oh fuck. Oh fuck. She was in a freaking murder house, and it was exactly how Karen described it. Blood rushed to her head, and she was assaulted by a sudden rush of nausea. But when she tried to hold her mouth shut, she realized what that feeling was on her skin. It was rope, because of course it was. Wouldn't be much of a murder house without a trusty rope. She projectile vomited everywhere, and even got some on herself, and the room that already stank like strong bleach now also smelled like vomit, and she just wanted to cry, and tears started rolling down her cheek. Why are you crying? Did you have a nightmare? Lillian froze. She hadn't noticed that she wasn't alone. Was this her captor? Wait, why was she in a murder room if this was about the bounty? Had Talion changed her bounty to wanted alive? Or dead? She was disoriented and everything was foggy, but she could tell that her captor was a woman, and a very beautiful one at that. Pretty girls don't cry. The woman said, unfazed by Lillian's not answering, getting right up in her face, putting a hand over Lillian's face just before the two got nose to nose. Her voice was perfect. Too perfect. What are you doing?
And
Why did? Lillian asked, pulling at the rope, and when that didn't work, she cleared her throat. And why did you chloroform me and take me hostage? Swear to the god Venus, the god of truth. Lillian heard the woman smile before she took her hand away from Lillian's face, blinding Lillian with a sudden rush of light, and the bitch punched Lillian so hard. Her head snapped to the left, and she heard a pop. The room was spinning, and she felt like vomiting, but she was able to muster up the strength to ask tearfully, "Why are you doing this to me? Tylon doesn't want me tortured now as well, does he?" Tylon? Tylon Atrium, said a different woman who also had a beautiful voice. The restraints on Lillian's neck stopped her from moving her head around too much, so she couldn't turn and look at the speaker, but she seemed nicer than the one that just almost knocked her teeth out, which admittedly sounded redundant, but she just had this feeling that this woman was different somehow. At the very least, she was stable, hopefully. "What do you want from me?" Lillian asked again, quieter this time. She was tasting blood, and her face felt like she had run into a wall. Whoever had hit her knew what they were doing, and she'd do just about anything not to feel that again. "We just want to talk," said the new woman. "Maybe this time you'll listen," said her must-be kidnapper. "Sorry, next time, I'll invite the stranger on my balcony to tea and crumpets and ask them about work, and maybe just for the fun of it I'd." "Please, miss," the other woman said.
what?
"You guys don't have my record on file laying somewhere around, or do you guys always go abducting complete strangers?" Her left leg was beginning to shake. "Karen Luciandides," the woman said with a deliberate slowness. A cold breeze danced up Lillian's spine, chilling her to the bone. This wasn't about Talion's or her own sins. This was Karen's fault, and that meant that the list of suspects had just skyrocketed into numbers, that for her own mental health reasons, she decided not to try and calculate. "What about him? I absolutely care for that man, and I look out for the things I care for. So I thought, why not get the what's what and the who's who from his latest assignment?" Lillian shivered and bit her tongue. The way the woman said, "assignment," made every muscle in her body lock and scream to get as far away from the psycho as possible. "Like I said, we just want to talk. About you, where you came from, and where you're headed. So this could all be over just as fast as it began. With less dramatics and gagging this time, I hope. You just have to tell us what we want to know, but if not, please, just tell us everything. I don't want to watch you being tortured," said the nicer one, though Lillian was starting to get the feeling that the woman wasn't much nicer. "You guys must be really confident that Karen hasn't already started looking for me." She smiled, pretending to be more confident than how she actually felt. "You know he will come looking, though? Like you said, I am his assignment, and he's already promised not to let anybody hurt me, so when he finds you, and he will find you, if you've laid even a finger on my head, you'll be lucky if he is so kind but to leave any of your family's friends' families alive. Do you understand me?" The psycho woman started laughing. "Sounds like hanging around with somebody with abilities on a higher level than yours has made a poor little mouse cocky. But sadly for you, little mouse, I have been a predator for all my life, and you're nothing more than a quick snack for me, so I'll give you one last chance, girlie. Who are you, and who is Karen protecting you from?" "My name is Lillian Hearthstone, and Karen is protecting me from Talion Atrium, with help from his sister Lexi." "What?" the two women exclaimed simultaneously. "You're the person that pompous prick has been so obsessed with finding." Sniff, sniff. "But you're only human," said the nice one. "Thanks for the reminder, and you're a spineless kidnapper who had a sneak attack a defenseless human girl, so who should really be embarrassed here?" She felt more than heard the oncoming footsteps stomping towards her unprotected backside. "Get out of my way, Mala. We're getting started now," said the psycho woman. "I'll show her a sneak attack." Maybe she had gone too far. "Don't use my name, remember, and I'd like to avoid hurting her as long as she's cooperating, so please calm down." Lillian let out a small breath of relief. She thought that she was about to get hit. Plop. It all happened so fast. 1 second, she was sitting there celebrating not being hit, and the next, she was underwater screaming helplessly for air, and the next, she was back in the room soaked to the bone without a sign of the culprit. She began coughing up and gagging violently on the water that was still trapped in her lungs.
What the?
Lillian tried battling the feeling of panic rising inside her. She had never thought that she'd leave Solaris by drowning on land, but here she was dying by drowning on land. And just as sudden as it all began, the pain up and vanished, and the crushing pressure of the water plugging her airways disappeared alongside it. "I'm sorry about that, but you had to be held accountable for provoking my associate. You need to know that we are the ones in charge, and you will treat us as such, now. Do you understand me?" Lillian nodded obediently. She couldn't upset them anymore. They clearly knew what they were getting into and who Karen was, and yet they didn't seem to care in the slightest. So hurting her really was an option, one that she'd rather they'd not pursue. "Good. Now, why is Talion after you?" Lillian sucked in a breath. "I'll answer anything else but that. You want to know where I was before this? Talion kidnapped me as a child, and ever since that day, I have been living in his mansion." Lillian tried to scream bloody murder. The water was back, and with it the head-splitting pain, but this time, it felt as if the pressure from it were pressing her bones together, as if they were magnets trying to get to their opposite attraction.
Poof.
And just like that, the water was gone, but the pain in her lungs had yet to subside, and the water was still blocking her oxygen, as if it were being made anew out of thin air. "You will hide nothing from us," the woman said. "But I can't, it's—"
Whack.
One of the women had walked up and jammed their fist into her ribs, launching her limply through the air. A scream caught in her chest, and her head exploded with an overload of information before.
Crash.
Split. The impact from the hard stone floor had her spitting up blood and disoriented. The drop had also taken little wooden pieces from her throne of pain, but besides a few chips to the frame and paint, it was still the perfect torture chair. Somebody lifted her upright with an unnerving amount of ease and speed and set her back in place. "You will answer her questions, or better yet,
Don't.
That just means more fun for me." The woman bent down as the other woman came into view, and for the first time, Lillian saw their faces without the fog from sleep, and a sob caught in her aching throat. Both of them were wearing those creepy killer clown masks Lillian would always see being sold on TV, and the woman in front of her was inspecting a really sharp knife like she was planning on testing it in the horrifyingly near future. "So, what's it going to be?" "Girly." Lillian wanted to cry. She wanted to scream, and she wanted to cry, and she wanted to punch, and she wanted to kick, and she especially wanted to cry. She wanted to open her eyes to it all just being a horrible, terrible, god-awful nightmare, and instead of the agony she was about to endure. She wanted to open her eyes to see that she had really just fallen asleep on Lex's lap again, listening to some gossip channel on the radio. She wanted to open her eyes and be anywhere else but here. Karen had slept. He stretched his arms in either direction and inhaled deeply. Karen still slept time from time. Not even a paranoid dragon shifter who was trained to be a war machine could avoid sleeping forever, but last night's sleep was different. It was a good different, though. He couldn't remember the last time he had slept like that, if ever, but he knew that it couldn't happen again, at least not while he was on this job. He couldn't risk to take his eyes off the two girls he was protecting for long, or they'd probably burn down wherever it was they were staying. He attempted to move his leg, but it had somehow gotten trapped under Lex.
She groaned.
"It's too early to be moving around right now. Can't you wait another hour or so before being you?" He rolled his eyes. "How is it that you aren't adopted?" She lifted her head and smiled, that goofy smile of hers. "Who says I'm not?" He met her grin with his own, which quickly turned into them laughing. "Seriously though, Lexi, orphan girl Didas. I need to go check on your friend. Suspicious girl in the back of the room, Hearthstone. She scoffed and lifted herself off of his leg, standing and stretched. If anyone looks suspicious, brother, it would be you. He scoffed back but didn't respond. Lillian wasn't the only thing him and his sister disagreed on. She was just the most consistent thing of late. He stood and walked over to and out the door, followed closely by Lex. The hallway was a tight fit for him. He had to crouch down a bit in order to walk, and thanks to his wide, powerful body, in a suffocatingly small hall. He couldn't walk side by side with Lex, and the entire upstairs hallway was way too long for only having 3 rooms up there. They came to a stop at Lillian's room door, and he knocked before letting himself in. Lamb, get yo ass up, we gotta talk. Oh my god, Lily. Lex shouted, pushing past him. Lex reeked of fear, but Karen's focus was now on another scent as urgency kicked in, and he picked up his pace.
Blood.
Karen, hurry. She's bleeding bad and she's been... Chapter 16. Lillian was staring out the peephole that she had made in the window blinds to spy on the commotion down below. From where her cell was located, she could see the overly lit driveway that went on for miles and all the important people exiting their vehicles, conversating amongst each other as they headed down the red carpet that covered the, admittedly, gorgeous marble path that led to the ginormous snow-white doors that would dump them into the atrium where he would be waiting. Lillian had to admit that Talion knew how to make people feel special.
Small or big.
Man or woman. He somehow always knew what they wanted, what they were thinking, and what to say to get what he wanted from them. But just like anyone else with that much power and influence, he had a chink in his armor. He hated ugly people. Not only did he hate them, but he also hunted them for sport with some of his rich, beautiful friends. He only associates with the beautiful, and that was a quote directly from him. They were always beautiful, some were even stunning, or drop-dead gorgeous. They were also stupid rich, and they were all currently marching towards his house, accompanied by their presence, their lies, and their agendas. Sebastian had allowed her to lift up the window just a smidgen, and the sound of a nasty growl had pulled her attention to one of the newly arrived groups. Somebody had brought 2 aggressive-looking tigers. Lillian had become used to the absurd gifts that the rich brought to these dinners, but even after 6 years of this, she had found that the more normal gifts were always the most interesting. What will Talion do with the tigers? He already has the dogs. She asked, still looking out her peephole. When no response came, she finally let go of the blinds and faced her butler Sebastian, who was reading that same stupid book that he was always reading. Beyond Solaris, Journey to the Blue Planet. You know that book inside and out. There's no way you don't. She said as she tried her best to glide across the room like Sebastian had been beating into her for the last week, in her long flowing swan white dress, with matching heels that Talion had picked out for her. It makes you look more mature. She shivered at the thought of Talion's look of hunger after he had first seen her in the dress. She had been afraid that his diminishing restraint over the years had finally run its course, and he was going to take what he thought was his. He didn't, thankfully, and he hadn't done anything too bad to her yet, just pinning her to a bed or a wall, and getting all up and close until his breath was on her cheek, and he'd whisper things dark, disgusting things into her ear. Things that he wanted to do to her. Things that she pretended not to be afraid of, but she had cried herself to sleep every night that past week, and her appetite was shot. Even now, with the promise of all kinds of exquisite fish, beef, and other foods, her stomach was threatening a coup that she couldn't afford. She was already nervous about what she had to do later, and seeing as Talion wasn't the type to be satisfied with anything but perfection, she couldn't see how vomiting all over his rich friends during a twirl would turn out positive in her favor. He turned the page and didn't even bother to look up before saying, "That dress makes you look malnourished. You should have used those wicked powers of persuasion of yours to have had the master buy you something that doesn't make your skin look like melted candle wax." She swiped at the book, wanting to punish that egregious mouth of his, but with speed belonging to a trained soldier, he avoided her attempts with ease. "Ugh, you're so freaking annoying," she exclaimed, giving up on the book. She walked over to the standing mirror on the other side of her bed and checked herself out in it. Lillian wasn't just white. She was burned in the sun, if exposed for longer than a minute, white, but this dress was something else. Not even her skin matched it. It wasn't as bad as that jerk Sebastian was trying to lead her to believe, but now… He sighed dramatically and loudly before locking eyes with her in the mirror. "Don't start freaking out on me. You look nice, I guess." She rolled her eyes. "Get over yourself. You're stupid, and incorrect jokes aren't enough to shake my confidence. Actually, I've already forgotten what you said, so… There, you ready?" she said, stomping towards the door. "You're such a child." He yawned, opening the door for her, and then fell into line beside her purposely, slowing his pace to match her own. She scoffed and stared daggers into his stupid, smirking face. "Oh, right, I'm the child.
Have you met you?
You're always 1 second away from making an inappropriate comment, like a child." He met her wrath with cold arrogance, smiling smugly at her. "Maybe you're just too easy to provoke. Bite me. I'd do anything for the health and well-being of my mistress." He mocked. The sounds of people grew near as they turned a corner into another empty corridor. The mansion was lit up like the tree they have on TV on Christmas Day, and yet its large, decorated halls felt as lonely as ever. She had walked on the unnervingly soft brown bear rug carpet that ran throughout the 5th floor of the mansion, only a handful of times. Talion didn't like for her to leave the room if not ordered to by him, but sometimes when he was away for business, and with the right guard on duty, she was able to convince Sebastian to convince the guard to let her out on the floor for a few minutes, and even though she knew that it meant nothing. It was the little moments, just like that one, that had been slowing her deteriorating state of mind, and allowed for the small air bubble of hope that she had hidden deep in the back of her heart. The entire floor was completely void of any personality, besides the rug, however. The walls were all painted white, no pictures had been hung, and there were only 2 doors on the entire floor. One was the door at the end of this hall that Lillian had been calling the inescapable door, and the other one belonged to her room. The inescapable door was designed for the specific purpose of keeping her locked away. It had a retinal scanner, it was key-activated, and you needed a thumbprint from Talion, 2 different passwords, one being vocal, the other not, and all of that was just to open the door. The door opened up to an elevator that only goes to floor 4, and that entire floor was filled to the brink with his guards, and inside the elevator there were 4 cameras, giving 0 blind spots, and the cameras were monitored, and the elevator only went anywhere if whoever was in the control center gave the okay. Sebastian threw out his arm to stop Lillian's advance. The guard on duty today was the same sadistic bastard who locks himself in her room any time he was on duty, which was conveniently always whenever Sebastian wasn't. He would say such evil things just to humiliate her, to hurt her, to break her. He smiled. "You look stunning, my lady. Did the master pick that out for you?" Lillian's blood heated, but before she could find the words, Sebastian spoke. "A little less gawking, a little more doing your job, like the trained monkey you are, Baxter." Lillian let out a dark laugh. Baxter smiled darkly and turned his attention on Sebastian. "I'd be careful if I were you, butler. The hallways around here get dark and people sometimes go poof. But you should already know that. You've been here longer than anybody." "Oh, I thought I told you to do your job, but I must have not been clear." They stood there staring for a moment, neither willing to back down, and Lillian thought that neither would, but finally Baxter backed off. "Okay." He walked over to the door and started the process of opening it. Sebastian smiled smugly and opened his book back up, but before he began to read, he said, "See that, the guard dog knows his place." Lillian didn't try to fight her amusement as she followed Sebastian into the now open elevator and past Baxter, who was smiling so tight that his skin looked as if it would split. He'd make her pay for this, probably spew a bunch of crap about how she was nothing more than a gutter whore, or how pathetic she was, or this or that, but it didn't matter right now, and if she got anything from today's party, that look on his face would be gift enough. "I hear that the soldiers your brother sent to crush the unrest in Figure have come back without the desired results. Now, I'm not insinuating that the soldiers he employs are not some of the best money could buy, but I've got connections in arrogant, corrupt, rich, politician number lost track of the count, dragged on trying to impress the extravagantly dressed Talion Atrium. The lengthy Fey prince was easily the standout of the party, even at his ripe old age of over 300. His exact age is unknown. The velvet red suit he wore hugged his lean body just right, and his gray tie held multiple medium-sized black diamonds. His smile was both inviting and yet somehow also said to make way. He looked young and healthy, but his eyes spoke of ancient secrets and dark ambitions. That thought was the same as when they had first met, and of course, just like the cliché cartoon villain he has continued to live up to the stereotype without fail. However, Lillian had discovered a few of his little secrets during her stay here. Talion looked his nose down at the man, who stopped mid-sentence. Talion's large stature and imposing demeanor always made people shut up whenever he gave them too much attention. She had yet to see him ever need to verbally tell somebody to be quiet. He holds all the power in the conversations he participates in, and if he didn't before he entered the conversation, he definitely does by the end. Are you calling my brother incompetent of picking his own men? Every word surged with a non-magical kind of power. His voice was icy, cold, and rough, but he articulated himself better than anybody around. No, I'm sorry. The man nervously chuckled, and Lillian couldn't help but feel bad for the guy. I would never do something like that, Talion lifted up a hand, and the man fell silent, and so did everybody else in the party as they watched like vultures to see the man's fate. How disgusting, and yet Lillian found herself hanging in suspense right there with them, hoping that a complete stranger was punished like an animal. How disgusting. They were outside in the courtyard at the back of the mansion. The moon was out, but it wasn't late. The sunset was at 4 p.m. today, which was normal only for this specific place on all of Solaris. At least, that's what Talion had told her. It had something to do with a spell placed on the area by an ancient witch that had tried to turn off the world's color. Whatever that meant, it had apparently almost worked, and Talion's great-grandfather had been a part of the group that killed her and put a stop to it, but she was a powerful witch, and the damage of her spells were not completely reversible. Nightfall and the Bleeding Sea are apparently the last two places in the world with any influence left over from the spells, but they aren't the only places still affected by the witch. Even in death, she has many followers spread all throughout Solaris, and they even have a church dedicated to her, like some kind of deity. There was the Pumi Desert. Talion smiled, apparently satisfied with the atmosphere, and finally broke the silence. I'm just messing with you. Go on, drink, and chat. Have some fun, everyone. This is a party, not a funeral. After all, lighten up, everyone. And as if on cue, the string quartet began playing, and people began laughing and cheering. The mood had changed so fast that Lillian had to rub her eyes to make sure she wasn't seeing things. She wasn't. Even the guy who was the center of all of the attention was relaxed and smiling. Were they really this blind? Or were they intentionally being dim? Everybody went back to having a good time and partying except for Lillian, who, after doing better than she expected on the new dance Talion had forced her to perform, and suffering through a few compliments and a brief conversation with a female leopard shifter, Laura Brooke, who was apparently a famous actress that one of these perverted old men were. Lillian made an excuse to leave early and was escorted back to her room by Sebastian in silence. Sebastian stopped at the foot of her doorway as she entered. Worry leaked from every pore in his body, and he was obviously biting his tongue
hard.
He knew just as she did what would happen later. Not much later. Just after all the people downstairs went home, and when the cleaning crew started doing their jobs. Maybe it would happen when she was asleep, or maybe the anxiety pumping in her system would make it so she'd be awake for the start. When it was going to happen, she didn't know, but what she did know was just because Talion didn't explode in public didn't mean he was going to explode, and Lillian would be his target. She mustered up a small sad smile for Sebastian and slowly began to shut the door. He tensed up, and she could see the war raging in his eyes, but she also knew he was loyal to a fault, and as the door inched closer and closer until, click, he didn't stop her. She pressed her ear to the door lightly and listened for his retreating footsteps until she could no longer hear them. She let her body sag to the ground and made herself as small as possible before she began quietly sobbing and praying to Zedith to protect her from what was coming. Chapter 17. Lil, wake up. Lillian, I know you're not dead, so wake up already, Lex shouted. Karen sighed and looked at his sister through the rear view mirror. She had basically become physically attached to Lillian's right-hand side ever since they had found her beaten within an inch of her life. Karen couldn't say for sure that Drayfin was behind it all, but it would be one hell of a coincidence that he was just conveniently around, and willing to let Karen go as easy as he did without getting the information he wanted, at the same time that Lillian was clearly tortured for information. What had she told them? That was the question on Karen's mind, but whatever she did or didn't say had to wait, so after treating her as best he could in their hotel, they laid her in the back of his newly restored car and headed deep into the forest, not stopping until they came upon a nasty-looking stream of mucus green water. He couldn't stand seeing Lex like this. He wanted to tell her to stop, that Lillian couldn't hear her, and that all she was doing was giving him a migraine. He wanted to tell her that it would be fine, and Lillian would be fine, but instead, he fumbled around with the contents of his car's center console, searching for the rock that had been burning a hole inside it for the last 2 years. If there was any time to die, it might as well be while making his sister smile again. He felt the cool press of the rock up against his fingers and grabbed it, lifting it from its place at the bottom of all the junk inside. He rolled the reflective black moon shard around in his hand for a moment, then opened his door and stepped out into the chill of the morning. "Where are we?" Lex asked, finally taking her attention away from Lillian long enough to see what was right in front of her. His plan was already working. "Karen, where are we? And what's in your hand?" He twisted his neck to look her in the face and give her his best. "Big brother's got this." Smile. "Karen, what's in your hand?" She squealed, trying to get to him, but Lillian was in her way, and it wouldn't have mattered if she wasn't. It was already too late. He flicked the rock into the water, like a coin, into a wishing well. "You self-sacrificing idiot. It was the only way." Something came flying at him. Fast, and it hit its mark, knocking him off the ground and sending him flying back a few feet. "Karen!" Lex shrieked. Before Karen even had a chance to move, a familiar pressure pressed up against his throat, pricking it in 3 different places. Warm blood trickled downwards as he held his head high, staring in the face of his captor. "You shouldn't have come back here, Leakin." "Hey." "Lillian." Lillian's eyes shot open, and she braced herself for the incoming blow, throwing up her hands, attempting to intercept. "It's me, Sebastian." The voice said, an urgency in its words. That did the trick. She was now wide awake and alert. The darkness that veiled the room told her that she couldn't have been asleep for too long. Maybe an hour, but Sebastian never came to her room before the morning. And then she heard it. The screams and the shouting. What was going on out there? He spoke before she could get out the question. "I'm sure you're confused, but for now, all you need to know is that Talion has many enemies that would love to see him gone, and one of those enemies has made a move, and we are going to use the distraction to get you out of here tonight." Lillian was stunned. Sebastian was helping her escape. She was about to escape. She couldn't find the words. Her eyes had adjusted enough to see the urgency written all over his face. "We have to go.
Now."
He grabbed her wrist too tightly and had to readjust his grip when she yelped in pain. He hurried her out of bed and then out the open door, into the hallway, saying quickly, "No time to change." Laying up against the wall opposite to them was an unconscious Baxter, who was both bound and gagged. Sebastian let go of her wrist and quickly picked up the unconscious soldier as if he weighed no more than a feather, disposing of him in the room and locking the door behind them. He took her hand again, and they rushed down the hall. Lillian's heart was racing. What about the inescapable door? They turned the corner, and the door to the elevator was open. He stopped their progress and looked at her, that arrogant smile of his returning. "Huh, how do you think I got up here?" On any other day, Lillian might have rolled her eyes, but if this was any other day, she'd have no hope of escaping from this bird cage she had been trapped inside of for the last 6 years. So she stole the moment. He tasted like wine and smelled like sweat, and just enough of that stupid cologne he wears that he smelled like him. He tensed up and pushed her away. Lillian, he tried, staring at her, clearly looking for the right words. She rose up onto the tips of her toes again, this time bringing a finger to his lips, and smiled. No time for rejections. He laughed, and this time, she was the one leading him into the elevator, to her freedom or possible death. He regained his composure as they hit the F4 button, and the doors closed shut. Stay behind me, and no matter what happens next, you get out. Do you understand? She shook her head. She couldn't leave without him. It wasn't even an option. He turned to her, and all signs of amusement, or the usual confidence that always lined his face, had been stripped away, and all that was left was pure misery. Listen to me, Lillian. I won't leave you to face that monster, especially after an escape attempt. I would rather die, so please, Lillian, if something prevents me from coming with you, please. Run, Lillian. Run somewhere he will never find you. Run until you can't run anymore. Don't tell me where you're going. Don't tell anybody. I will come find you when I can. The intensity in his eyes clamped her mouth shut. She couldn't leave him. She wouldn't know what to do or where to go, and she wouldn't be the only one on Talion's bad side if they were caught, and the difference was, Talion wouldn't think twice about killing Sebastian, but she had never seen him like this before. Her voice broke, and tears began to form. That's unfair. You're practically begging me to leave you here to die. I know. Wrong answer. Jerk. Why do you always have to be such a damn jerk? She cried, throwing a punch expecting him to block or dodge it like how he always did when she was mad at him.
Whack.
Her fist made contact with his steel frame, and she instantly regretted it. Are you done? She shook her hand as if that would help the throbbing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that hurt me more than it did you anyway. Good.
Ding.
The elevator slid open. Because we're here. She did as she was told as the doors opened, and even before she saw the scene in front of them, she was able to smell it. Fresh bodies, all bloody, and all of them had defecated on themselves. It was easily the most disturbing scene she had ever seen in her life, and her stomach was threatening to add to it. I know it's bad, but we have to go before Talion can send reinforcements, Sebastian said, grabbing her wrist and pulling her forward. She snatched her hand away. How had she never noticed? This handiwork had to be his, and yet he didn't have a single scratch on him. She knew that Talion kept him around for more than fetching his tea, and she had seen how the soldiers guarding her door treated him with a certain amount of respect that no regular butler would get, but she had never known he could do something like this. And that's when it really set in. He was doing this all for her. He had known some of these guys way longer than he had known her. Some may have even been his friends, and he had cut them down like it meant nothing to him. All for her. So the one thing she wouldn't be to him was a burden. I can walk on my own. You need to focus on what's ahead. He looked at her, and she lifted her head, daring him to challenge. He nodded once and turned back towards the sounds of death. Keep up. They began to move, turning the corner and running smack into a young soldier. Sebastian? He said, looking from him to Lillian. You had the same idea as me. He gave an awkward smile to Lillian. Don't worry, we'll keep you safe. Yeah, sorry about this. Faster than she could register, Sebastian stole the pistol from the man's hand and slammed it into his head. The guy never had a chance. He crumpled to the floor and Lillian felt bad for the guy. You could have just tied him up. He huffed a breath. How about we escape now and apologize for how we escaped later? He said, using his supernatural strength to break the pistol in half. Let's go. They made it to the stairwell without any more incidents, but that's when the real battle started. A group of 3 humans were stabbing one of Talion's soldiers to death. Blood squirted everywhere from everywhere, and it made Lillian sick all over again. This was no simple difference of opinion. This was rage and deep-seated hatred. Are these the human rebels that have been kidnapping high-profile children and strapping bombs on them and using them like exploding assassins against their own family and anyone who gets in the way? or the innocent passersby who just happened to be walking by at the wrong time. I didn't have a notebook full of groups ballsy enough to take on the atriums, so I've had to take what I could get, and now isn't really the right time to get judgmental," he said, taking a deep breath. 5 comebacks immediately popped into her head, and she would have used one of them if it weren't for Sebastian's face. It was turning gray. "Sebastian? Your face. It's turning gray. Damn it already? I knew I'd have a tough time readjusting, but this is ridiculous." Sebastian took out a half-blue, half-black pill with a dragon symbol on it and shoved it in his mouth. The grave vanished almost instantaneously, as if it were all her imagination. "No time to explain," Sebastian said, as if reading her mind. He drew 3 daggers. "Don't fall behind." Without another word, he sprung into action, launching the daggers one at a time. Each made impact with the heads of the humans who had just finished brutally murdering the soldier they had ganged up on. At least he wasn't really working for people who would do something so heinous and take pleasure from it. She shook at the look in their eyes. Their eyes. She stopped moving. Sebastian turned around and glared at her. "What are you doing? We have to go now." She met his stare with her own confused look. "I know what happens next."
What?
Everything flickered. Something was very wrong. "We make it outside and you got bitten by one of the tigers that escaped its cage." Lillian stopped. Another flicker, but this time she could swear she felt the earth shake as well. "And then you kill it, and just when we think we're home free." "Lillian, we were intercepted by Talion and an army of his men." She looked up at him as soon as she finished the thought, but they were no longer in the stairwell. They were outside, being backed down by Talion and his men. Talion put a hand up, and his men stopped their advance. "I'm so disappointed in you, my precious, stupid flower," Talion said in that terrifyingly calm tone of his. The one he uses before he lashes out. "It took you this long to realize that this was all just a dream. How stupid can you be? Thinking you can escape from me. You're nothing but a frail, helpless little girl who's bound to eventually get everyone she cares for killed, all in the name of protecting herself. How pathetic."
He spat.
The words hit her like a wrecking ball. "You're not real. You're just a product of my imagination. All I have to do is wake up and you'll be gone." She hoped that she sounded more confident than she actually was. His smile grew demonic. "Maybe, or maybe, me and you are the only real ones here, and I'm just distracting you as I probe your brain for where you are and where you're headed." Was that really possible? She had never heard of such technology, nor a spell that could do something like this. She looked around frantically, hoping to find anything to prove him wrong, that all of it, including him, was a dream, but it was as if the entire world had stopped, besides the two of them. Even Sebastian was standing completely still. Talion let out a harsh laugh. "See how easy it is to manipulate people. All it takes is one question, one statement, to call everything they know into question." His eyes grew dark. "You should know. You do remember what you did to poor Sebastian here?" She stared at him, shaking violently, trying to block out the memories. He cocked his head to the side. "You don't? Here, let me show you." His men started marching again as the scene began to play out as it had happened on that day. "Take this, Lillian, hurry," Sebastian said, pushing a phone into her hand. "What is that?" Talion scowled. The advancing army was only 50 or so feet away now. Sebastian double-tapped the screen and said the word, "Survivor." The phone began to glow in amber. "This is a very expensive, very difficult item to get your hands on. It cost me almost everything I own just to get this one. It'll send you to the first place it was activated. I apologize in advance for where you get sent to. I couldn't go too far without arousing suspicion. Oh, and it's only a one-way trip. It will self-destruct once you arrive." Lillian began to glow amber as well, and she wanted to yell and scream at the moron. He was sending her away to safety while he stayed behind to be killed like a moron. She wanted to tell him that it should be him taking this way out, not her. She wanted to tell him just how much she missed him and that she's kept the promise so far. She wanted to say so many things.
But she didn't, and then.
There was darkness. Chapter 18. Beep. We just have to wait. Medicine has been.
What?
What is happening?
Beep.
Leakin has been. We shouldn't have come here.
Beep.
I know.
Uh.
I hope you wake up soon. I have so much I need to talk to you about. That voice. It sounded sad and lonely and oddly calming. She knew that voice. Lex. Lillian heard the word and felt every excruciating second it took to get it out, but the voice. It couldn't have been hers. So weak and scratchy, each letter was strained and pathetically quiet. It felt as if there were a cement block weighing down on her throat, and opening her eyes seemed almost to be an impossible task. Lily. She heard Lex sob. Are you awake? Lillian tried her hardest to open her eyes, but had to settle for lifting her left one slightly. Lex was hovering over her, tears in her eyes. You're gonna be okay. She hiccuped. But Lily, they took Karen and… I need you. What was going on? Who took Karen? Where were they? And why did she feel as if her entire body had been hit by a bus? She tried to move her lips again to ask all of the questions on her mind, but a sudden overwhelming wave of drowsiness swept over her body, and she had to use all of her remaining strength to keep from passing out on the spot. She didn't want to go. Not again. She wanted to stay with Lex, but she was so tired. Lily? Lily. Lillian couldn't fight it any longer. Lex would be fine if she just took a quick nap. 5 minutes tops, and no matter what she did, Karen would be okay. So she surrendered to the feeling, closing her eye and letting herself be dragged back into the darkness. Was the spear really necessary? Karen asked, rubbing his neck where the spear had left little holes. Sure, I heal fast, but that shit hurts. Her Royal Majesty's Captain of the Guard, Siphon Weber, scoffed, losing that cool composure of his. You're lucky I didn't plunge it all the way through and save us all the trouble of having to listen to your lies, Leakin. Or is fire breather, I can't remember. I never wanted to hurt her. A spear came hurtling at Karen, but he didn't move a muscle. The spear stopped at the last second, hovering just in front of Karen's heart. Save me the pathetic excuses. You're only alive right now because my queen has ordered it so. Otherwise, I would have ended you the moment you used your Atlantis stone. Karen smiled smugly. You couldn't kill me if you actually wanted to, you big softa. The spear inched closer, but never touched his skin. Watch it, Leakin. You've been gone for a long time. Things have changed. Maybe, but you still can't take a life.
Karen said,
looking Siphon in the eyes. You're weak. You always have been. Siphon scoffed again. So, I'm weak because I can't take a life as easy as the mighty fire breather?
He spat.
Fine, call me weak. At least I'm not a spineless little bitch. Karen was in Siphon's face in a heartbeat, and was only one more away from laying him on his ass, when a familiar sweet voice spoke. I'm glad to see you two are still as friendly as ever. Siphon took a step back, turned towards the spiral stairs in front of them, and bowed. It was time. The underwater kingdom, Crescent Gamma, being one of the smaller kingdoms of the Crescent Alliance, has been run by the Signer family for so long that nobody can remember a time when they hadn't been in power, which on its own was already an impressive feat. But even more impressive was that the Signers were Lamias. The Merfolk and the Lamias don't have a necessarily hostile relationship, but it's not as if you would ever find them mingling with each other, and you most definitely don't see the Merfolk looking for rulers outside of bloodlines. The Merfolk are a very proud people, and the ones that choose to stay in the body of water they were born in were suspicious of outsiders, even racist at times, and yet the Signers have been a well-respected regime within the Crescent Alliance forever now. Well-loved by the people and other underwater creatures. Crescent Gamma is the only underwater kingdom with a non-sea person.
Creature thing.
As its leader. Karen felt something akin to shame wash over him, but he played it off, as he, instead of bowing like Siphon did, turned and faced the queen of the Merfolk of the Crescent Gamma Kingdom. Now entering, hurriedly called one of her heralds. Queen Eleonora Vitania IV. Karen hated how much blue littered the underwater kingdoms. They were already underwater, and none of the kingdoms he had ever visited put up blinds or something over the domes or their weird excuses for buildings, so they could always look out into the body of water they were in if they wanted, and they'd get to see blue all day long. And yet, everywhere you went in one of these stupid places, there was blue coral, blue paintings, blue walls, and blue spiral stairs. Karen hated how much blue littered the kingdom. But she was different. Even in a literal sea of blue, walking down a spiral staircase made from a translucent stone that she somehow filled with raging torrents that combined with some kind of projection or something of a storm on the walls, made it seem like she was controlling the storm. You always did know how to make an entrance. He smiled. She was still wearing the gold necklace her mother had given her on the day of her coronation, and the matching bracelet her father had given her on their wedding day. The ring was gone, however, and to his surprise he felt a tinge of sadness prick him in his heart. Another surprise came in way of her dark ocean blue dress. It no longer had sequins all over it, and she looked more mature, wiser even. He hadn't been the only one to change. She was showing off her massive tail instead of her long, sexy legs, probably on purpose, because she knew he loved her legs, and even though she was nice to a fault, she never passed up an opportunity to be petty when she was in one of her moods. She smiled back at him, but it was all icy. To any bystander, though, the way she was looking at him would seem as if she were disinterested, bored even, exhausted from his mere presence, but he knew hurt when he saw it, especially when he was the one who put it there. "It's good to see you again, Eleonora. I'm Queen," she said bluntly. "What? It is Queen Eleonora to you. We are not betrothed anymore, or do you not remember?" Queen or no queen, she wasn't about to talk to him like no. He bit his tongue and quelled his anger. If he started something now, not only would his life be in danger, but Lex's and Lamb's lives would be forfeit. He took a deep breath in and counted to 3 before responding. "Queen Eleonora, I'm—" "You would temper your tongue? You who spoke vulgarities to my father when you were still nothing more but his little guard dog. Whomever it is that you have brought to us must be very important to you." Karen didn't react, nor did he talk back. She clearly didn't care what he had to say, so he would just wait for her to tell him what she wanted from him. Nothing to say? Good. She made it down the last step and strode over to him. Each step was confident and angry. She stopped in front of him, and he hated that she was looking her nose down at him. He wanted to show just how insignificant she really was, but he just stood there. "I don't want to hear your lies, or your master's lies, or whatever poison was about to spew from your mouth," she hissed. He clenched his jaw so hard that it hurt. If she didn't want to hear him out, why did she not just have him executed on the spot? "Then why am I here?" he asked, trying his best to keep from losing his temper. She smiled. "Because I want to hurt you, as bad as you hurt me." The door to their right swung open and Lex walked in. 4 different spears from 4 different people were pointed at her neck in 4 different directions. Karen saw red. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. We all know you're fast, but even you know my elite guard would end her life before you got a chance to make a move." What did she say? "I've got to save Lexi." "I can't. What if I'm too slow?" "I can't think like that. I have to do something." "Hey, Karen, look at me," Lex demanded. Karen forced his attention away from the blades that were threatening to impale her and looked into her eyes. There was no fear in them, no concern, only love and determination. "I'm okay. We'll be okay. Just hang in there and let me save you for once." She smiled. He stared at her, all of his adrenaline gone, and he felt like he was going to collapse from the loss of it, but he smiled back and nodded. He had noticed that Eleonora was watching the 2 of them closely. "Captain, can you please escort the fire breather back to his cell? His presence is no longer required at this time. I will send word for you when everything is ready." Karen let out a feral snarl, like some kind of beast, and got into a defensive stance, daring anybody to touch him. It would be a cold day in hell before he left his sister alone with this bitch. "It's okay, Karen, please, if you have any faith in me at all. You will leave and let me handle this." She never broke eye contact. "Please, Karen." she begged. Slowly, very slowly. He gave a quick shake of the head and relaxed his posture. Wow, I never thought I'd see the day. Siphon laughed. Me either. Eleonora said, turning her full attention onto Lex. Let's go in, mate. Siphon said, grabbing Karen's wrists and cuffing him in Kyrian shackles, in a way Karen was sure that Siphon thought was supposed to be rough and hurt him, but too bad for him because right now Karen felt nothing but the beating of his own heart.
Bazum. Bazum.
Lex stared daggers at the bitch in front of her. She knew the bitch's and her brother's history together, and Lex didn't give a fuck. The moment that bitch decided to fuck with her brother was the same moment that she signed away her right to continue breathing, and the way the bitch was looking at her was the same way that all of her opponents looked at her just because she wasn't as big as her brother. That was a big mistake. She was a Didas after all, and fixing problems and starting them were what Didases did best. The woman met her stare with a smile. You four can go now. I would like to talk to her alone. The four mermaids who had been pointing their stupid pitchforks at her tensed up, and even Lex was surprised by the balls on this bitch. Are you sure you want to do that? I'm told that I can play rough, if unsupervised. Lex said, a calm fury building up inside her. The woman snickered. Yes, I'm sure, and I will not repeat myself. Get out now. The four guards dropped their weapons from her neck, turned, bowed to their queen, and made a brisk exit. And then there was silence. Just two women sizing each other up. Let's play a game.